Hello, hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for joining me here today on the Heart of the Soul podcast. My name is Amana, and I am so happy that you're here. This is a space where we explore what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth. We connect through the ancient ritual of storytelling, sharing about that which is often unseen and unspoken. It's my hope that soaking in these stories may inspire you to uncover your own innate knowing and center you into a more embodied and alive version of your beautiful, unique self. Today is Wednesday, August 20th, 2025. We're moving towards a new moon in Virgo on Friday. I'm currently in Washington State in my mother-in-law's bedroom. You may have noticed that I decided to take a little summer pause from the podcast so that I could rest, integrate, and play more during this long summer light. And I am so honored and delighted for today's podcast. I have Rose Swarts here with me through Zoom. When I happened upon her profile, The Wild Birth Keeper on Instagram, I was immediately drawn to her energy, her messages, and the ways that she is showing up in the world. I'm so grateful that Rose generously said yes when I invited her to share her birth stories here. And I would love to hand the mic over to you, Rose, to share with listeners a bit about yourself, where in the world you're located, and maybe where your motherhood journey starts, or like we talked about before, maybe even your own birth story from your mother, because as we know, our own birth imprints of our experience being born from our mothers becomes the foundation of our relationship with birth. So Rose, so happy to have you here. And yeah, take it wherever it feels good for you here.
Okay, thanks, Amana, and hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. I feel really happy and really excited, like, for our conversation today, and to like talk to you and to hear your voice, and not just like a person in Instagram, like, you're real. Um, so yeah, it's really beautiful. Um, so my name is Rose. I have three kiddos. I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 2-month-old. I live in Costa Rica. I live on the Caribbean, the South Caribbean side of Costa Rica, in a place called Talamanca. And specifically, the town that I live in is called Cowita. And I've been here for about 2.5 years. I have been kind of like nomadic my whole life. Before here, we lived in Haiti. Before that, Australia. Before that, I was living in lots of different islands in the Caribbean. And I've just kind of like moved over lots of different places around the world, and I love moving and traveling. And I was an artist for many years, but when I became a mother, I was just kind of propelled into birth work. And so now I work as a birth keeper here in Costa Rica. Um, and yeah, I'm also like a kind of budding herbalist, and I have like a little mini farm, and I'm obsessed with growing tropical fruits. And we're really like blessed where we live to be able to harvest rainwater and grow all our own food. And we're not completely off grid, but we're like kind of semi off grid. And yeah, my journey, I would say, like, yes, definitely starts with my own birth. And I am endlessly grateful to my mother for breaking that cycle. My mother was born in a hospital, and my mother has very conservative parents. My grandparents were very like conservative and strict, and like um you know do what they were told. And my mother broke that cycle. She decided to study naturopathy and homeopathy, as she fell pregnant with her first, my older brother, she didn't tell a single soul that she was going to have a home birth. Like, she couldn't tell her mother, she couldn't tell her family. She told a couple of girlfriends, and at the time, my mum and a few other women, well, more than a few, a bunch of women in Australia including Jane Harbitt Collins, were forming like the home birth movement in Australia and organizing conferences and things like that. So my mum was kind of like heavily involved in that movement. And she gave birth to my brother at home, and then 2.5 years later gave birth to me at home as well. And so I always grew up with my birth story being told to me and like seeing photos of my birth. And it was always told to me as just this like beautiful, wonderful, like magical thing. And it was very much like family centered. I think the midwife arrived like 20 minutes before I was born. It was, very straightforward and beautiful. And my brother was 2 at the time, or like 2.5 at the time. And he was very like prepped for my birth. And he made my parents like promise that they would wake him up when the baby was coming. And so he fell asleep, and I was born at 10:20, which funnily enough is the exact time that my youngest baby was born just 2 months ago, 10:20 at night.
Amazing.
And yeah, and so my dad did go in and wake him up, and I was born on my parents' bed, and my brother saw me be born. And I've seen photos of, he's wearing this little nappy and a little blue shirt with penguins on it. And after I was born, he asked my mum and dad, like, how old is she? How old is she? And my parents were like, well, like 2 minutes old, and so he was like, oh, okay, so she's not 1, so she must be 0. And then they said, okay, yeah, I guess, yeah, she's 0. And he went to my brother's very mathematical, and so he went to his little jigsaw where he had all his numbers, and he got the 0 and made them put it on a cake and sing happy birthday, and it was like a whole thing. And so I always grew up with that story, and I always just kind of assumed that birth happens at home and happens in families, honestly. And I also grew up with many other children that were also born at home because of the women that my mum was hanging out with. And so I didn't really think that much about it. I just kind of thought that that's where birth happens. And then as I became a teenager and started traveling and moving around the world, birth wasn't part of my, sort of consciousness at that time. I wasn't thinking about birth. I was thinking about, traveling and moving and making jewelry and artwork and things like that. And I think, unlike, like, I remember I listened to your story that you were one of those people that always knew that you would become a mother, and that has always been part of your journey. But that's not true for me. I didn't I didn't really think about it. It wasn't like, something that I knew that I definitely wanted to do. And I didn't have that many conversations with people about that. And I didn't have much contact with like babies or kids just because of the kind of world that I was moving in. I remember when I did get pregnant with my first at 26, I thought to myself, like how many babies have I even sort of held or had interactions with? Like, I'd never changed a nappy. And so I really just it just wasn't my world at the time. And maybe at some point I had the thought that passed through my head of like, I'll think about it when I'm 32, when I'm 34, when I'm 35, like if that's something that I want to do. And so when I did fall pregnant, I wasn't planning it. It was a huge shock. I had never been pregnant before. I was hitchhiking around the islands of the Caribbean at the time, and I met a man like just a few days before. Like, I was hitchhiking on boats, on yachts and like cargo ships, just kind of like stowaway. And yeah, it was only 3 days before I was about to leave. This is an island called Providenciales, which is like a part of Turks and Caicos. I was hitchhiking to the Dominican Republic, met him, went out for a drink, and I liked him and he liked me, but I was leaving the island, so nothing was going to happen. And then a few days later, we'd been on a couple of dates, and he said, well, why don't you stay like another week, and we can see at least whether we like each other or not. And so I did that. I called the captain of the boat and asked him if he would come back and he could do like another trip and I could hitchhike with him sort of next week. And he said, yeah, cool, no worries. Bunch of Cuban guys. And ended up staying another week on the island, decided that I really did like this man, and he really liked me. And so I did end up going to the Dominican Republic, but I left a bunch of my stuff at his house and I came back after a week. I had to go to the Dominican Republic and buy a bunch of jewelry supplies anyway, so that was going to happen kind of regardless. And then I went back, which is something that I had never done for like any man ever before. I'd always sort of run away from love like at lightning speed because I didn't want anything to kind of like impede or stop this kind of beautiful lifestyle that I was living of moving around. And yeah, and then I basically moved myself into his house, and 8 weeks later I was pregnant.
Wow.
And so yeah, it was a really big shock. Yeah, but I mean, like, it's also, you know, we know how we get pregnant. So,
Yeah.
you know, so it was, and actually, now I'm just remembering, I actually found out about that pregnancy through like long distance Reiki, which is super weird. I
Oh,
bled, and then 2 days after, 2 days or 3 days after I finished my blood, I did a long distance Reiki session with this chick in like Austria, and I was in the Caribbean. And then 2 days later, she sent me like a whole email write up of like the session, right? And she's like, oh, yeah, your throat chakra, like bloody blah, and like all through the chakras. And then right at the end, she's like, P.S., like, congratulations on your pregnancy. And I was like, perdón? No, no está. Está equivocado. Sorry, there's somebody just calling out for somebody on the street.
no worries.
And yeah, she was like, "Oh, P.S. Congratulations on your pregnancy. Super early, but." And I was like, "What?" And then I just sort of discarded like everything that she said in the email because I was like, "This bitch is crazy." Like, because I wasn't pregnant. Like, there was like no way I'm pregnant. I just bled, not pregnant. And yeah, at first I was like, "Okay, no, I'm not. Definitely not pregnant." But then, of course, yeah, 4 weeks later, I didn't bleed, and then a week after that, still didn't bleed. And then like I think I waited like another week because I was just in denial. I was like, no way, no, I'm not. Um, Also, just for context, like um that man, the father of my older kids, had told me that he thought that he was infertile because he had had a partner of like 5 years and they had tried to have a baby and were unsuccessful. Um, so that was kind of playing in my mind. I was like, no, no, I'm not. And then, of course, eventually I went and bought a pregnancy test and I was pregnant. Um, and then after I found out that I was pregnant, I told him about the email from the Reiki chick. And he was like, what? He was like, she impregnated you, like virtually from Austria. I was like, no, dude, that's not how pregnancy works.
Like
So
you
yeah, that's
did it,
that.
even with the sperm that you said you didn't think worked. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, And you know what? It's interesting because um then later on I went back through some emails, and 6 days after I met that man, I sent an email to my best friend at the time and said to him, I've met the father of my kids. And so there was like something when I met this guy that I knew. It wasn't like, oh, this is my like the one, or this is like, my forever person or anything like that. It was like something in me just knew that I was going to have kids with this guy.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so then I was pregnant, and that was a big shock to both of us. We were still getting to know each other, and I was living on this island in the middle of nowhere where I had no friends and no family. I think I cried for about a week, um, with the pregnancy and kind of this just grieving of like, you know, the end of my maidenhood or the end of my travels. And, I kept trying to convince myself that, oh, I'll just sort of like throw the baby in the backpack and keep hitchhiking, but knowing that wasn't going to be true and that I was going to have to make some changes to how I was living my life. Um, and then after a week of tears, then I just embraced the pregnancy and I didn't I didn't like do any prenatal care really throughout that pregnancy, throughout that first pregnancy. I I didn't really know like what you do, throughout a pregnancy. I figured, oh, I'll find a midwife, but I certainly wasn't going to find a midwife on that island. Um, I didn't have any friends that were birth workers at the time. I spoke to my mom about it and, of course, told her about the pregnancy. And my brother was scheduled to get married when I was going to be 7 months pregnant. And so I sort of did the calculations and I thought, okay, well, I'll just go back to Australia when I'm 7 months pregnant. I'll go to my brother's wedding and then I'll just find a midwife in Australia when I'm 7 months pregnant. So that was my plan. So I just lived my life and was pregnant and had a really great pregnancy with my first. I had no morning sickness. I felt amazing. I was eating like incredible food. I was still hitchhiking and selling jewelry. I traveled to Puerto Rico and Jamaica. I traveled to Canada. I had to leave the island every like 60 days or 90 days because I didn't have like a proper legal visa to be there. Um, so yeah, that meant that I moved a lot during that pregnancy. But I felt amazing. And then I did at 15 weeks pregnant, I did go and get one ultrasound. My partner at the time was like, I'm pretty sure that's what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, yeah, I have heard that that's also what you're supposed to do. And he was like, well, let's just do it and make sure, everything's okay. And at the time I had zero knowledge on, ultrasounds or the potential risks of ultrasound. And so we did go to a private, she was a private, I don't think she was an obstetrician. I think she was a gynecologist on this island. She was a German lady, and she was lovely. And it was only, I was in her office for maybe 30 minutes. It was a really beautiful encounter. She had a really beautiful space. She asked me like how I'm feeling and where I think I'll give birth. And I said, oh, I'm going to go back to Australia and I'm going to give birth at home. I was born at home. And her response was, oh, that's so beautiful. I gave birth to all my children at home. And it was a really positive interaction. It was like the ultrasound lasted like 5 minutes and that was it. And that was like the extent of all the prenatal care that I had. So it was a very like positive interaction with like the allopathic medical model. And then I flew back to Australia when I was 7 months pregnant, went to my brother's wedding, and then I was like, great, now the wedding's over, let me find a midwife. And then I went down the rabbit hole of like realizing that, oh, like independent home midwives don't really exist anymore. They're all being reported to APRA, and which is the governing body in Australia. And they're super hard to find, and you can't find underground midwives. And giving birth in a hospital is like absolutely not happening. Birth center is basically like giving a birth in a hospital, except that you've got a fitball and a pretty little picture on the wall. And so I kind of learned all of these things, being heavily pregnant. Oh, hey, sweetheart. Sorry, Amanda, I'm going to have to pause again. What's wrong, my love? So yeah, I just kind of like naively thought that there would be like all of these beautiful, amazing midwives, and I would just like interview 10 of them and then just choose which one I loved more. That's kind of just knowing nothing, just sort of assuming that that would be the case. And then, yeah, I realized, wow, okay, there was only where I was living. So I was living at my dad's property just temporarily, until I gave birth and then back to the Caribbean. And he's on the south coast of New South Wales. I mean, Australia, there's a lot of rural areas in Australia where you're big drives away from from towns. If you're in a big city, there's more chance of having more access to perhaps more midwives. But yeah, where I was, there was one that was like 5 hours away. I called her and had a phone conversation with her, and I immediately did not like her. She was older, and she was like very kind of controlling, like this is how you should be, and oh, you haven't had any prenatal care, and oh no, and this and that, and I just didn't like her. And so I didn't even bother meeting up with her. And then this other woman who was also about 3 or 4 hours away that had been recommended by a friend of a friend or something. I called her, and actually she seemed quite lovely on the phone. But then when I told her my guest dates, my due dates, she wasn't available. She had like I think two other births at that time. And so I kind of got off that phone conversation going, okay, well, I'm not going to a hospital. So I guess I'm just going to give birth to this baby at home, like by myself, with my mom and my dad and my partner, and that'll just be it. Like, because, yeah, I can't see what else am I going to do, And I hadn't heard of the term free birth or unassisted birth. I had read like Ina May, and I had read, Grantley Dick Reed and Michelle O'Donnell and lots of different books throughout that that first pregnancy, but I had never heard of unassisted birth or free birth, those terms. But I had lived in Jamaica and seen women just give birth at the river. I'd lived in Cameroon and seen how women just birth. And so at the time, I kind of thought, well, ideally you have a midwife. But if a midwife isn't available, you're still just going to birth. That's kind of how I saw it. And my parents at the time, they weren't like super vocal about it, but I could tell that they would prefer if I had a midwife. And they're like, well, it'd be sort of nice if there was a midwife. But I was like, yeah, but I'm not finding one. So that's how it was. And then when I was 36 weeks pregnant, my mum and I went on a road trip into the mountains, sort of down south of Australia. And we went to this kind of like hippie sort of town. It's called Tilba. And there was all of these, natural, like holistic, shops and businesses and, women, walking around barefoot with armpit hair and like people living off grid. And I'm like, there is no fucking way that these people are taking themselves in labor to a hospital that's 2 hours away and giving birth. Like that's just, I don't believe it. And so then I started just asking around, like I was just talking to women saying, does anybody know any midwives? And there not any midwives in this town? And eventually one woman said, oh yeah, the lady that works in the shop over there, she had a home birth a couple of months ago with a midwife. Why don't you go and chat to her? So went in there, chatted with her. She gave me the phone number of the midwife. I called her and she came and met us for coffee like an hour later or something like that.
Wow. So
And yeah, and it was lovely. And I immediately fell in love with her. She was beautiful. I remember she was wearing this like long green, like flowing dress, and she had a nose ring, and she was barefoot, and she had armpit hair, and she was just so like loving and like nurturing. She'd had her first baby at 19. She'd had two beautiful home births, and yeah, she was just awesome. And she told me that when I was due, she was going to be at a music festival like in the north of Australia. And so she said, I can like prep you to just like birth at home. Like we can do prenatal care and everything. And I can, leave the birth pool at your house and stuff. And maybe you'll just give birth by yourself while I'm at the festival. Or if you don't give birth yet and I'm back from the festival, then yes, I can attend your birth. So that was great. I was like, fantastic. And that made, my mum and my dad feel a little bit more chill. I think she put like Syntocin in our fridge or something and like explained to my mum how to use it or whatever. And the birth pool was there. And so, but sure enough, I didn't give birth until she was back from the music festival. Um, and yeah, maybe I should just jump into that birth story of my son.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Um, yeah, so um, I've had like 4 pregnancies and 4 births. And if you think of like kind of birth experiences like on a continuum, and over here you have like, ecstatic, like dreamy, like painless, like beautiful, like peaceful birth. But the birth of my son was like right here on the other extreme. Like it was chaotic, it was dramatic, it was excruciating, um, and just like unnecessarily dramatic and chaotic. From the get-go, like until the very end. And so I think I was 40 plus 5. It was 8 o'clock at night when I had the first contraction. I had absolutely zero prodromal labor for my son. No, like no, like Braxton Hicks. I can't like bear to use that term. Like prodromal labor, practice contractions, early labor, whatever you want to call it. I had zero of that. And so it was just like on like Donkey Kong from the very first go. And the first contraction frightened me so much. It was so violent. I had boiled the kettle to pour myself a tea. And so I had like a teacup here and I was pouring water into the kettle. And it was like kind of mid-air hot water. It was when I felt the very first contraction. So it shook me so much that the hot water spilled over my belly and my bare belly. And so I burnt my belly so badly. So that was terrible. And that was like the beginning of kind of like, it was just this sort of added drama
Wow.
and pain. So then I went through 17 hours of active labor with a posterior baby with severe back pain and like this intense like burning on my
Talk
tummy.
about like a firewalk for this first birth. Whoa.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that was fun. And then I just went immediately into like needing counter pressure, needing a hot water on my back, not finding relief. And like I have to say, I panicked. Like I definitely like just panicked. I was just like, what is this? Like I'm in so much
Understandably.
pain.
Yeah.
And you read all these like stories of like this, beautiful early labor and this and that. And I was like, shit, if this is just like chill early labor and it's going to get like, 100 million times more intense than what it's like now, like there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And I was that doubt was entering into my mind from like the very beginning. So that was really just like mentally tough. And I feel like for the first 4 or 5 hours of his labor, I was resisting. Like I was really resisting. I was panicking and resisting. And so it was just pain, pain, pain. And it was really like quite interesting, like in retrospect, the sensation of like, the sensation of my uterus contracting was so clearly different from the pain of like his spine against my spine.
Mm.
Um, because he was in a posterior position. And the pain of his spine against my spine never subsided throughout the whole 17 hours. But the uterus, the sensation of my uterus contracting obviously subsided like as the contractions, and then I would have a break. But they were pretty back to back from the get go. Um, and after a couple of hours, I think maybe that was at 8 that it started. At 10, my dad said, should we call the midwife? I was like, no, it's too early. And then um, my dad at some point just made a decision to call her without checking in with me. I think I was
Mm.
so deep in the pain, and she lived 5 hours away.
Okay. Yeah.
So he was like, he my mom had two like fairly like, easeful births. And so I think my dad seeing his daughter in so much pain and so sort of like deep in like intense labor, knowing that the midwife was 5 hours away, he kind of like freaked out a tiny bit and just called her and was like, she's in so much pain, can you please come? And it was in the middle of a storm as well, huge storm. And so I remember thinking like, it's crazy, you're in labor land, but I was thinking like that I felt bad that she had to drive, in this huge storm. And then when she arrived, it must have been, I don't know, it must have been like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something like that when she arrived. And I like immediately begged her to like check me, like when she walked through the door. I just kind of like threw myself on top of her and was like, please. Because, I was like searching for some kind of like validation that I was, close to giving birth. And, of course, that's like the worst idea. And she, one thing that I didn't say about her, about my midwife, was that when I met her when I was 36 weeks pregnant, she insisted on like coming every week to my house to meet me and to spend time with me, and to get to know me. And I remember saying to her, like, oh, I feel bad, like you're 5 hours away, it's so far for you to come. And she was like, no, she was like, it is so important that we get to know each other and that I fall in love with you and that you fall in love with me and that I know how your kitchen works and that I know how your bathroom works and all of that. And I remember that. I remember that that was really amazing and that she really made an effort to like, not many midwives take on women that late in pregnancy. And she really made like an effort to just, yeah, fall in love with me. It was
Mm.
in so few weeks. And that she also had said that when she comes, when I'm in labor, that if it's okay with us and our family, that she would sleep in our house for 4 days. Because she lived so far away and, she wanted to be there for the immediate postpartum. Um, so she came with her little like, suitcase of all of belongings and things to stay for a few days. Um, and I remember, yeah, when I begged her to check me, she just like really gently, like, she just smiled and she looked at me and she was like, Rose, you're doing so well. Like, let's just keep going. How about I check you when the sun comes up? She's like, let's do that. Let's do that. And, of course she knew that like I was nowhere near. Um, she didn't want to check me and, you know, disappoint me and discourage me. And so I was like, okay, okay, okay. So I was like, had this kind of like deadline of like, if I can just make it to when the sun comes up, if I can just make it. And then after she was there, I felt like I was able to kind of get into more of a rhythm. I was able to like breathe a little bit better and relax a little bit better. And she was able to kind of like give like counter pressure that was like actually where I wanted it because I was, trying to get my partner to do it on my mom. And so it's the worst when you need it in a specific spot and the person is like half an inch, like where it's like, no, that's just like infuriating more than helpful. Um, and so that was good. And then yeah, I felt like I got into more of a rhythm. At some point I got into the pool, I don't know what time. And um I wanted it. Oh, and I was in the shower for a few hours. But I was still feeling him really, really high, and it wasn't feeling like he was descending. Eventually, the sun came up. She checked me. She said I was 6 centimeters. I was like, meh, like not super, not super motivating. But it was yeah, still back to back contractions the whole time. The pool kind of helped. It definitely relaxed me. And at some point during the labor, I was in so much pain that I don't want to say gave up, but I gave in. I was just like, take me. Like I remember just speaking
Do
to,
it, baby. Surrender.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I just remember talking to spirit and to my baby and just being like, just take me, like do whatever you need to do with me. Just go ahead. I'm done. Like just, and I really just, yeah, like surrendered and kind of just like, kind of softened my body and just allowed the waves to just kind of like flow over me. And at one point I was in the pool I was so exhausted. Also, I didn't mention that I had been vomiting the whole time and hadn't eaten anything, couldn't keep water down. So at this point, I was very tired, and dehydrated, severely dehydrated. And at one point, I was in the pool, and my partner had to, I was just kind of like this in the pool, and my partner had to hold my chin up so that I wasn't just drinking water. And if he didn't hold my chin up, I was just like I would just start drinking water because I didn't have enough energy to hold my face above the water. Yeah, it was intense. And there was all this drama happening behind the scenes. My dad's house, like we ran out of hot water in my dad's house. And so he climbed over the fence. He tried to call the neighbors, but they weren't home. They were off on holiday in some country. He climbed over their fence, broke into their house, hooked up a hose through their laundry to their hot water tap, hooked up a hose over the fence into the pool. And that we had water coming from their laundry for some time, and then it exploded in their house, and then he had to go and like clean and take care of like hot water all through their house. He had to give them like a whole bunch of money. So there was kind of like just drama surrounding the whole entire birth. And then at one point I left my body. I remember that. I remember just leaving my body and kind of just sort of floating as a witness in like and looking at this woman in the birth pool below me and thinking, wow, like this woman is working so hard. Look at her. She's in labor. She's so beautiful. She's doing this. She's doing that. And then after a couple of minutes being like, oh, fuck, that's me. And coming back into my body and being like, oh, no, this is my work. I really actually have to do this. I can't just step out and disconnect like that. And so that was really interesting. Um, and I wasn't moving very much. Like in retrospect, I would, it would have been great if I had moved more. But yeah, I was kind of paralyzed by the pain, I would say. And um, at some point, probably I would say after like 16 hours, so getting to the end, I I just in my head, I didn't say it out loud yet, but in my head, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I said it in my head before I verbalized it. I said, I can't do this anymore. I need help. I need support. I think I need an IV. I'm severely dehydrated. What am I going to do? And everybody there in the room, there was 4 adults. There was my mom, my dad, my midwife, my partner. They all knew that I didn't want to go to hospital. And so if I said that then, it would be pretty serious. And so that's what I said. At some point, I said it out loud. I said, I think I need to go to hospital. I think I need to transfer. And to my surprise, none of them had anything to say, like to encourage me to stay home. Like in retrospect, well, that was kind of the moment to say, you got this, you're close, your baby's coming, you're doing it, like all of the things, that you say, like as a birth worker, and none of them said any of that. And I think it's because they saw how drained and exhausted I was. They were also all drained and exhausted, and nothing was moving or changing. And we, hey, cutie. And so we're in the area where my dad's property is. There's a hospital that's 15 minutes away, and there's a hospital that's an hour and a half away. The 15-minute away hospital is like just a really small little clinic, and they don't do births. And the one that's an hour and a half away is a big hospital. And I said to my midwife, can I please just go? Can I just go to the little clinic and just get an IV? And then I think I'll be fine. And she was like, okay, let's do that. So she called an ambulance, and she said to the ambulance on the phone if they could come and take me to the small hospital. And they said no. They said no, if she's in labor, unless it's an emergency, she needs to go to the big hospital. So we'll come and we'll take her to the big hospital. And I could hear this conversation, and I'm like, no way, no way. I'm not going an hour and a half in the back of an ambulance. I'm a whale, no. And so I'm like, no, I'm like, cancel, forget about it. And then I think actually what she did is she lied about the baby's heart rate to like make it into an emergency. And then they agreed to come and to take me to the small clinic. And so they walked in, and by the time the ambulance, by the time the ambulance got to the house, I was actually outside the pool now. I got out of the pool and I was on all fours, and I started to feel FER. I started to feel the fetal ejection reflex. And I was like, wow, but he still felt really high up, really high up. Um, and so I was like, my body just pushed, I think twice, but it felt like pushing against nothing. Like it
Mm.
felt like my body was pushing, but there was nothing to push against. Um, and they didn't feel effective. Um, and then the ambulance walked through the door. They wheeled a stretcher um, into like the lounge room where my dad's house is. And they said, okay, well, she needs to get on the stretcher, and then we'll, put her in the back of the ambulance, and we'll go to the clinic. And the stretcher was so high. And so I said to the ambulance drivers, oh, can you just lower it so that I can get on it, in labor? That's quite challenging. And they were like, oh, no, it doesn't lower. Like that's just, it's not the type of stretcher that lowers down. I'm like, what? Like, I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense to me. And so it was this really, really high up stretcher. And so everyone in the room was like, well, she can't get on that. I'm like, what are we going to do? Lift her on top of it? So they're kind of preparing to lift me on top of this stretcher. And then I don't actually remember this. Like, this is a part of that experience that I have zero recollection of. And the only reason that I know that I did this is because there were other people there and they told me back the story of what they saw.
Yeah.
But they said, my partner at the time said that it looked like I was like just possessed by some kind of spirit. He said I got up I was on all four, like just got up and ran to the stretcher and kind of like did this like hurdle thing with one leg,
Wow.
like literally like athletes doing like hurdles, like or like track and field, and sort of like hurdled myself onto this stretcher. And I don't remember doing that, but I do remember being on the stretcher and I felt his head just come into place. Like I
Mm.
felt his head just move like 10 inches down through me and like through my pelvis and into my birth canal. And I was just like, what? Like, was that sensation? It was insane. And so then I'm on the stretcher on all fours. He's like crowning, and they're sort of like, I'm just so hyper focused on like me and my body. And then around me, like they're wheeling me into the back of the ambulance. My dad and my mom are getting into the car to follow them in another car. My midwife's jumping into the ambulance. And I'm not talking because I'm like, just, he's crowning. I can feel him. I'm, you know, just kind of like in my body and just so like sort of shocked by what's going on. And then as they put me into the back of the ambulance, I said to my midwife, no, 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 wait, the baby's coming, the baby's coming. And she was like, what? And then I kind of just like went to my side and opened my legs, and he just shot out onto the stretcher in the back of the ambulance. And while that was happening, we had driven like about 100 meters down the road. So then I'm like, stop, 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 stop.
Take me
And
back.
yeah, and the midwife saying, stop, stop, the baby came out. And my midwife said, I mean, his whole entire body shot out in one contraction.
Wow.
And she said that if she wasn't there, he would have like just hit the back of the ambulance. He just came out so fast.
Wow.
And so, he was obviously like sort of like coming down, stuck, stuck, stuck on something. And then that movement of getting on the stretcher just kind of like shot him straight through, and he was ready. And then the ambulance drivers were like, well, what should we do? Should we, do we keep going to the clinic? Do we go back home? And like, we're all like, back home, obviously. And so, yeah, we came back home, and that was like the sort of the most like unnecessary thing, or maybe it was necessary, I don't know. But it was, then we came back to the house. I think my mom made like tea and like muffins or something for the ambulance drivers. They asked if they could stay for the birth of the placenta.
Okay.
I don't know, it might have been some kind of like protocol of theirs. But they were crying and they were like, that's so beautiful. They'd never seen a birth before. Um, and I was just completely exhausted. I was just drained and exhausted and severely dehydrated. And
Mm.
yeah, I just like ate a meal and you know, hydrated myself. And I remember just feeling incredibly depleted, like after that birth.
Totally.
I was not even able to kind of really like, hold my son very well or like celebrate in any way or like hold any kind of ritual. I was just drained, completely
Yeah.
drained.
Wow. So incredible. And like, just like you're saying, many, many births that I've been to, like women do get to a point where they say, like, I can't do this anymore. And every single time that I've been there and heard women say that every single time they birth their babies, normally even a short time later. Sometimes it's longer later, but they do. And
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, now that I know, obviously, like I was coming into transition and feeling like, I can't do this anymore. Um, but yeah, anyway, that's like that was the birth of my son, and I feel like it was, yes, definitely like unnecessarily like chaotic and dramatic. Um, but I learned a lot of things.
yeah,
I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned like from from all those mistakes.
we
And
learn
I
so
learned
much from each birth for sure.
absolutely. I mean, if you're a fool if you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's like, what is the saying? Like if repeating the same
Yeah, like
thing
fool
again
me
and again
once,
and
shame
again
on
and again.
you, fool me twice, shame on me, or something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right, exactly. And so, I reflected like I had like just to talk about the postpartum a little bit of that experience. The first few days were like intense with breastfeeding. It was really amazing to have my midwife like sleeping in the next room. And she said to me, like anything that comes up throughout the night, just come wake me up. And so she was great, like helping me breastfeed in the middle of the night. And that whole like learning curve of um your milk coming in and learning to breastfeed. So that was really great. And but aside from that, I did have quite like a stressful and difficult postpartum with my son because 4 weeks later we had to leave and fly back to the Caribbean. And so I had that whole drama of like trying to get all the paperwork and get his passport by the time our flight was due. And so I like do not recommend flying with a 4-week-old anywhere ever. Yeah.
Sounds really hard. And yeah, all that like, mind stuff of like the masculine of the paperwork and having to get that complete when you're in your like cosmic portal of postpartum. That sounds really hard.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. So yeah, I learned a lot from that too, because that was a difficult postpartum for
Mm.
sure. Um, and then yeah, should I move into my daughter's my daughter's pregnancy?
Yeah, I would love that if you feel ready.
Yeah. So then when my son was oh sweetheart, ¿qué pasa? Let's do the other boob. Let's switch you over. Yeah, let's switch you over. You switch you over. You want to say hi to Amana?
Look at you. Oh my goodness. Hello.
Yeah. Let's try the other boob. Let's see if there's nice milk in this one. Um, yeah, when my daughter's pregnancy was also not planned.
But
Um,
yeah.
yeah, like when I hear about all this like conscious conception, all this beautiful stuff, I'm like, no, that is not that is not me. Like, and it's interesting because I love my dad, and me and my dad are, like best friends, but the one thing that drives him mad about me is that I plan nothing in my life. I just don't plan. I never plan anything, nothing. And he's like loves to plan. He's all about planning. And so I think it's sort of like makes sense that I also haven't planned any of my pregnancies.
Yes.
Um, yes, yes. Do you think that's funny?
And
Is that funny?
so that son is now, he's the
9.
9-year old. Yeah, okay. And he was how old when you, surprise, were pregnant with your next?
He was like 18 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. And then yes, and yeah, he was 18 months and I was on my way back to Australia from the Caribbean. So we had decided to move to Australia. And as during that move was when I found out that I was pregnant. Why is it so funny? And then I had a very like yeah, a very like chill pregnancy with my daughter, just hanging out with my son. Um, and I kind of decided like very early on in that pregnancy, perhaps even like before I became pregnant, that like next baby I would just free birth. And I hadn't like I don't think that like again, I don't think I knew of that term free birth, but I remember just thinking that I needed to be alone, like that I would just kind of like a little bit more privacy, and kind of like yeah, kind of like be more in a cave. There was a lot of people in my first birth, and it felt, unnecessary to have all those people there. Um, yes, Kitty. And so during the pregnancy with my daughter, I also connected with her while she was inside my womb more than like any of the babies that I've had. Like I just had this really strong connection with her during the pregnancy. And she told me, I remember being really early pregnant, and she told me her energy was just like, I know how to be born. It was just like, I know how to do this. Just don't get in my way, and everything's gonna be cool. Like that was kind of like her energy and her personality, and she's exactly like that today. That's just who she is. And so yeah, so I just connected with her, and so I didn't do any prenatal care, and I just intended to stay home with my son. I prepped my son to be there at the birth. We just watched heaps of home birth videos. I think I did during that pregnancy find some podcast of free birth, like an unassisted birth, and I just started during that pregnancy to hear of like these terms, and that was like I will say that it was helpful. It was helpful to be pregnant, to be planning to just stay home and give birth, and to know that there are like you know a bunch of women around the world also doing this. That was helpful, and I felt yeah, like weirdly kind of like supported by them, because I was also in a new place. I didn't have like girlfriends. We were moving back to Australia to be in this town where my parents did live, but we hadn't ever really spent a lot of time there. So um, and I do remember feeling that during that pregnancy, feeling lonely. My partner was in Haiti at the time. He's Haitian, and we were buying a block of land there. So he didn't come to Australia until I was 5 months pregnant. And even then, like when he was there, like yeah, I had his company, but um, like I didn't have any sisters to like celebrate that pregnancy with, and because I wasn't having any kind of like care, I wasn't like seeing somebody regularly to kind of like celebrate my pregnancy with, or just kind of like the milestones or nothing. So I definitely felt a sense of like loneliness, and just kind of like lack of celebration of my pregnancy that I would have liked. Um, and that experience is ended up being the reason why I started running village prenatals. Because I felt like pregnant women shouldn't feel that way, no matter what they're choosing. And also, pregnant women shouldn't be seeking like allopathic care to like pee in a cup and get their blood pressure taken just so that they can have like somebody, some other human, like look at them in the eyes and say, like, yes, you're still pregnant and how wonderful. Like, I mean, there are so many other ways to get that kind of care that women are seeking. And we can do that, in circle and amongst other women.
Yeah.
And
So
it
you
doesn't
want
have to be peeing in a cup, right?
you totally, yeah, you wanted connection and care, and that's not like pee in a cup. And so I think most people, most women listening probably know what village prenatals are, but will you just share a little bit about village prenatals or your village
Sure.
prenatals?
Sure. So I've hosted village prenatals now in 3 different countries and in different languages, and I love them so much. I call them spiritual and emotional prenatal care. And essentially it's just, well, I run them once a month. I know there are other women that do it like more often than that. But yeah, essentially we gather and, we celebrate each other's pregnancies, and I often invite like other doulas and birth keepers in the area. So it's an opportunity for pregnant women to like be seen, like be heard, like express themselves, like talk to us about their ideal birth, and to just be listened to, but also to like hear their options and like meet women that are working in the birth space, that can provide these services to them that perhaps they had never previously heard of. We drink tea and we like eat. It's always like a feast of food, and we laugh and we cry, and yeah, we women just like are vulnerable and express all sorts of like incredible and amazing things. We sing songs, we drum, and it's always a really beautiful and magical like experience. And I think especially for women that are choosing wild pregnancy, um, it can provide that
It
for
can
them.
be like a touchstone throughout their pregnancy to be with other women and, like you said, celebrate and talk and just
Absolutely,
have
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
shared
And
experience.
I think for women also, for women that are seeking, like for women that are like, you know, like participating in like, the medical system, um, even those women can feel like there's this kind of innate knowing that there's lack in that experience. Um, and they definitely feel like, yeah, just feel more like nourished by, sitting with women than, yeah, they do like seeing some dude, in an office for 15 minutes that like couldn't give a crap about them, doesn't know anything about their lives, you know? So yeah, it's a really beautiful, beautiful experience. And like, I've really loved hosting them. And it's an absolute co-creation as well. Like the women of the community come together and we co-create that space.
Of course, yes. And so you pregnant with your daughter, you were sort of missing that element in her pregnancy. You were,
Yeah,
but she was like, I know how to birth. I love that you had that communication with her in womb and
absolutely. Yeah. And I
yeah.
was like, I had zero fear. I was like super chill the whole time because I was just like, I'm gonna leave it in her hands. Like she, you know, she said she's got it. I'm gonna trust her. Like I'm gonna trust her that she's got it. If I don't trust her now, like at some what point in her life am I gonna start to trust her? So, I'm choosing to trust her from the moment that she's in my womb, that she knows how to birth herself. That's what she's saying. And the only kind of like little thing that I had like come up, well, actually, there was 2 things. One thing was I was birthing again at my dad's property. And so I had to deal with like my dad's fear of like neonatal resus that was coming up for him. Because my dad is like CPR trained, and he's done a little bit of that. He doesn't work as a paramedic or anything, but he felt like if I was birthing on his property and he's the only one that's CPR trained, that he would somehow be responsible, like if she was born not breathing. And so me and him had to have like deep conversations and chats about that. And I just made it really clear for him that like I'm taking 100% responsibility. You are not responsible for any outcome, positive or negative, and really went through all the steps with him about what exactly I would do if she came out white, if she came out blue, if she came out purple, if she was not breathing, what we would do with the cord, what would we not do, how the lights need to be low, everyone needs to shut the fuck up. I need to have her on my chest. Like we really went through everything. And I said to him, this is all the information and this is what I'm telling you. And you need to get cool with this, or I'm going to find somewhere else to birth, because I can't be there with like this energy of, that he has to come in and save, or that he's somehow responsible. And so Yeah, so that was great. And he was on board. He like took it all in and was like, got it, and really understood. And then the only one other thing that came up throughout pregnancy was, I remember I was like, so because my son was posterior, right? So, and like I kind of held on to, who knows if it's true, but I kind of held on to like this idea that my birth was so painful because he was posterior, and whether that's true or not, who really cares? I've heard plenty of stories of women having posterior labors that were their easiest labor or birth. And so, but it was definitely a thing in my head. And so my conversations with my daughter throughout that pregnancy were always like, please be anterior. Like, also, could you maybe be anterior? Like, and so I was kind of like always just sort of sliding it in. Um, and then when I got to 38 weeks pregnant, I kind of had this like little mini crisis. And I took myself to a doctor, and this woman who is a midwife, I took myself to her and asked her to like palpate my belly and tell me that my baby was anterior, even though I was like, palpating my own belly. I just needed this like outside validation. And I walked into her office like super defensive. I was like, I don't want vaccines and I'm not going to pee in a cup and don't do this. All I need you to do is palpate my belly. And she just looked at me and kind of laughed and was like, Rose, like you're 38 weeks pregnant. Like I could tell you whatever the hell you want. Like I could palpate your belly and tell you what's happening or not tell you, but you can walk out there and tomorrow your baby flip, you might not give birth for another month. And I was kind of like, yes, of course I know all that. And then I just walked out and said nothing happened. And then I drove home, and I remember driving on the highway, and I just pulled over and I just cried and held my belly, and I spoke to my baby and I said to her, like, I fully, fully trust you and I fully accept any position that you want to come in. If you want to come Frank Breach, if you want to come Superman Styles, if you want to come whatever, posterior, great, like fantastic. Like I want you to come whatever way that you. And then I just cried and held my belly, and then that was it. And I just let go of that. And so that was really beautiful. And then that was it. And then I was good. And 2 weeks later, at 39 plus 5, I went into labor with her. My son was 2 and 5 months. I felt a tiny little bit of early labor with her, which was nice, in comparison to my first. And it was, I think it was, just trying to remember. I went to sleep on a Friday night. Saturday, really early in the morning, around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., I felt like a few really, really light contractions. And I thought, ooh, this is like some early labor. This is super exciting. But I get to feel little, light tightenings and sensations. I woke up around 8 or 9. I remember I drove to the supermarket with my son because I was like, I got to stock up on coconut water and I got to stock up on watermelon and grapes and all the snacks. And then I had one like contraction while I was in the supermarket, just super mild, super light little tightening. And that was exciting. And then that was it. I didn't have any more tightenings or contractions. And then at around day, I started to feel other little like nigglings, just little nigglings and tightenings. But in my head, I was like, oh, it could be another week, could be another 2 weeks, who knows. And then trying to think of the timeline. Yeah, at 4:30, so it was my dad and me and my son in the house. At 4:30, my dad went to a meeting. And he said, I'll be an hour. I'll be back at 5:30. And I said, cool. And at this point, like, I wasn't in labor. I wasn't telling anyone that I was in labor. And I hung out with my son. We danced. We cooked food. I had a few little niggling contractions. My dad came back at 5:30, and I said, oh, wait, I think like possibly maybe the baby would be born tonight or tomorrow. Like I can feel something happening. And he said, oh, okay. And I text my mom because she lived an hour away. So I text her that so she could start maybe coming over. Yes, so that she could be there like in the evening. Um, and I said to my dad, you know, maybe you could hang out with my son, and that way I can go into the bedroom. And I said to him, I feel like I would like to be alone, and that was at 5:30. And then I remember I walked up. My dad just has like 3 stairs between the kitchen and the bedrooms. And I walked up those 3 stairs. And when I stepped onto the top stair, I just felt her descend, like just massively descend. Like it felt like she descended like 6 inches. And not in a contraction, just she just came down. And that was the most incredible sensation. And I thought, she's coming. Like she really wants to come. And then I thought, okay, maybe she will be born tonight. And then I went into the bedroom. I had really prepared my space. I had put blankets on the windows so that it was really dark. I had candles. I had a beautiful playlist. I had like my Fitball. Um, I had all these delicious snacks. Like I had put a lot of effort into making it a really beautiful space. And I was in there for an hour by myself, and it was the most incredible hour of my whole entire life. It was so beautiful. Like I was just dancing and singing to the music and just like feeling her. And like I was having contractions, but they were super mild. They felt great. Like they were not painful at all. It was just beautiful. And I thought, oh, this is early labor. Oh my God, early labor is just amazing. You know, like I was just, I'm going to enjoy this. And hopefully this early labor lasts hours and hours and hours. Yeah, at 6:45, I had this kind of like message, like this kind of download from like spirit or from my baby that said to me, "Get ready, your baby's coming." And I was kind of like, "What?" Like no, like I'm still in early labor. I'm not even feeling like intense contractions like at all. And so I kind of like spoke back to this voice or spirit and was like, "No, I'm sure it's 4 or 5 hours." You know, like my ego trying to like talk to spirit. And then straight after I kind of like spoke back, Amorcita. Yeah, and so that was at 6:45, and then yeah, I remember like speaking back to that and being like, no way, like I've got like minimum at least another 4 or 5 hours to go before my baby's here. And then as I said that back, I felt the physical sensation coming down through me. And I was just like what? Like trying to like compute what's going on in my head. And I was still fully clothed. Like I still had pants on and a shirt. And so then at that point, my mom walked through the door um, to my dad's place, and I was yelling at my mom to come and help me take my pants off. Um, and I think she was confused because she was like, I was kind of, I was like, Mom, quick, like, take my pants off, the baby's coming. And she was like, what? Like, you're not even like in real labor. What's going on? And so she's trying to like get my pants off, and I'm like, quick, like faster, like remove my pants quicker, please. I'm on all fours, like kind of leaning on the bed, and she pulls my pants off, and I just intuitively like reach inside myself, and I can feel her little head in the sack inside me, and that felt incredible. That was the most incredible feeling to feel like her little head and like the little bumps of the hair and the sack and everything. That was just so cool. And I was like, oh my God, she's right there. Like she's coming. And then my mom was like, really? What? And then um and then I just had one contraction and her little head popped out. And then her bag like exploded, like the waters popped as her head came out. And then because I was on all fours, my mum could see her from behind me, and she opened her eyes, and my mum could see her, and she was like, I can see her. And then she said, oh, should I call dad and Ollie, you know, my dad and my son that were at this point on the other side of the property. And I said, yeah, call them. And then they ran they ran in, and I remember hearing like, you know how like adults running sounds different to kids running, especially on wooden floors. You know, it's like kids running like because of little feet, like. And so I remember hearing like my dad like walking, and I remember hearing my son running because I was facing the other direction, so I couldn't see them come in. But my mum says that they like got into the room, were there staring, saw her head, and then her body just flopped out. And it was just like two, like I wouldn't even call them intense contractions. It was completely painless. It was just like amazing. It was just, I couldn't believe that she was here. And I just, lifted up her little slippery body and held her to my chest. She had, she had the cord like, kind of like across her body, like a little kind of like, beauty pageant type situation. And she came out like she had just taken a bath. Like she looked like she didn't have any vernix or blood or like amniotic sac or anything on her. She just looked like kind of like just ready for the world with her little sash. And then and I haven't ever found out the sex of my babies during pregnancy, and I really I have picked correctly the sex of all of my babies every time I've been pregnant. So I knew my son was definitely a boy and he was a boy, and then I knew for sure that she was a girl. And I looked down and, I think my mom said, look what you have, Rose. Everyone was sort of eager to know. And yeah, I said, oh yeah, she's a little girl. And my son, I remember my son um came up to her and he was kind of not sure like where to touch her or how to hold her, and he just put his finger like on her ear and just kind of like ran his finger like up and down her ear, and he said little ears, and that was just the sweetest little moment. um and yeah, that was her birth, and her I birthed the placenta maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour later. I never really like recorded times or anything. We didn't weigh her, we didn't
Mm.
um measure her or anything like that. And also, interestingly, um, worth mentioning because you don't hear this that often, is that unlike my son who latched straight away, and many babies latch straight away, my daughter didn't latch, wasn't interested, was very tired, and just fell asleep. And I just wrapped her up and she fell asleep. I think 4 or 5 hours later, we cut her cord. My son cut my daughter's cord because my brother cut my umbilical cord. So it was like a little tradition that we wanted to keep going. So that was really sweet.
Very special.
Yeah. So he cut her cord, and before we cut the cord, we spoke to her. She was totally like knocked out, but we spoke to her and asked her permission to cut her cord. And, I said to her that, I'm going to nourish you now, like from my breast. And we thanked the placenta for everything that had done. And then she just passed out, and she slept for 13 hours straight. And I was just high as I've never been so high in my entire life. I was just so high. I was high as a kite on oxytocin. I just stared at her for 13 hours. I just couldn't move. I was just staring. I was just like, how have you just come into the world in this most incredible way? And also like now you're not breastfeeding, and I should be freaking out, but I'm not, because I trust you and I love you and I trusted you and loved you throughout the whole pregnancy. So why would that change right now? And so I just stared at her, and then sure enough, 13 hours later, she woke up. She was ravenous. She was so hungry, and then she just latched straight away perfectly like a pro. Um, and that was it. Hmm.
Wow, what an incredible birth, and so, like you're saying, so different from your first. Like you were showing the spectrum, like it sounds like she would be much more over on this, you said no, you weren't having pain with your sensations, and she just
No, it was completely painless, completely like totally ecstatic, orgasmic. It was unbelievable, incredible. The only pain that I did feel was with the after pains.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh, those
people
are
don't talk
like
about after pains.
Yeah, and how they get progressively more intense with each baby that you have. It's yeah, you
Yeah.
labor's over, and I mean, it is our wombs like shrinking back down to their size, which is important, but those pains can be so intense.
So intense. Yeah, like her birth was only 70 minutes, I feel. Like if you can even call her contractions like active labor. The whole like counting like when does labor start? I kind of usually I count it from like active labor starting from the first contraction that you can't speak through. But because I never really had any really intense contractions with my daughter's birth, I'm like, well, where do I even? But I feel like it was about an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. But then the after pains, I had like severe after pains for 72 hours, 3 full days after her birth. And I was just like, what is this? This is wild. And I remember like hitting my knuckles on the wooden bed to try and like distract, like confuse my brain like of like other pain to try and like, I was just like just desperately trying to do something. It was the most intense pain.
Yes,
But
you're in such this like it's like these two things because like you're saying you're like high as a kite and you're like in this oxytocin and like and so in love and yet then there are these like really hard painful sensations happening at the same time. It's such a weird place to be within.
it's wild, yeah. And my mantra for after pains is always just like, my body is wise, my body is wise, my body is wise, because it's pain, but it's like fantastic, positive, amazing pain. Because it's not like, oh, you've cut yourself with a machete. Like this is not good pain. It's like your body, like you say, it's your uterus contracting back, and yeah, if your body's doing it so efficiently because your body is wise and you're breastfeeding and it's this beautiful cocktail of hormones. And so yeah, that's like my mantra for after pains. And
Yeah.
I had um I had a much better postpartum with my daughter. I had a lot more like support. I didn't have to fly anywhere in 4 weeks. So yeah, it was definitely like much more chill time, but it was also like physically more chill. Or one thing I didn't mention with my first is that I've always steamed. I've always done like yoni steaming postpartum. And I was introduced to it by my partner at the time, because he said that in Haiti, that's what all the women do. They steam after they give birth. And so that was the first time I had heard of it. But I felt like that physically that really helps, like in the postpartum time and the healing.
Yeah,
But
can I
with
ask you too, did you, because like some people here in the US, they say like not to steam when you're bleeding. I myself have steamed during like when I was bleeding postpartum as well, but so I'm curious, did you steam while you were bleeding from yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. When I from day two, um, I usually recommend from day 2 to day 30. If you can steam every day, if you can make that happen, then fantastic. It usually ends up being, every second day, or some women will do it for 10 days, and then stop. But I usually do it from, yeah, day 2 to day 30. And yeah, while bleeding. Absolutely. When I'm not pregnant, and I'm steaming just every month with my cycle, I usually steam on day 6 after my blood. But postpartum, yeah, I steam while, yeah, with the lochia.
Wonderful. And I know that we have just a little about a half an hour left. So I'm wondering, is there anything else you want to share about her birth experience or postpartum? And then maybe do
No, yeah, I think no, that's it. Yeah, I can move into like the last 2 pregnancies that I had. I'll try and be quick.
no, I have more time. If you have more time and your kids are fine, we can move beyond this half hour, but I also want to respect your time too if you
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think everyone's okay, but we'll see.
okay.
Um, so yeah, so then I had lots of things happened. The whole COVID happened, and we ended up moving to Haiti, and we lived in Haiti for 3 years. And I also separated from my partner at the time. So the father of my two older kids. And when my daughter was about 1, I felt like like a spirit baby knocking at the door. And I had to really be like, wait, you've got to wait, you've got to wait. I had so many like sessions, like meditating and like speaking to her. I knew it was a little girl. And I was in the middle of separating, and it was like quite like a difficult and abusive marriage. And it was quite challenging to separate. And we were living on this like farm together and talking about building 2 different houses, or do we move? It was like a complicated time and living in a complicated place, which is Haiti. And so, yeah, I would say that like this child, this baby that wanted to come through, I knew of her and connected with her for a really long time. And then I would say, when was I'm trying to think of dates? About like 3 or 4 years ago now. It would have been 2021. No, it was beginning of 2022. I fell pregnant to a guy that I was dating at the time, and it was not a serious relationship. He was in and out of the country. It was a really bad time. I had moved to a new house. I was starting a business, a massage business, and it was just like the world's worst timing. And I was also in Haiti, like didn't have a lot of friends or family around. And I just knew that like I was not going to be able to bring this baby into the world, and it was not the right time. It was not the right man to have a baby with. And so had like I was pregnant for 8 weeks or almost 9 weeks, and I really had to go through a process of like I would say 6 weeks of like really intense like meditation and speaking to this spirit baby, because I wasn't able to go through the pregnancy release unless I had this connection with her and she understood that like I needed to end this pregnancy. But that like I needed her to be okay with it and to understand. And for her to hear that like I know that she wants to come through.
Yeah.
And
Can I pause you just for a moment? Because I've had someone ask me on another show where I was talking about speaking to my spirit babies as well. And they asked me if I could like articulate or describe what it's like to speak to our spirit babies. And I think we all do it very similarly, but maybe a little different. And I'm curious if you're able to articulate what it's like for you to speak to your babies in spirit.
sure, yeah, I think for me it's definitely like a lot of dreams, like having dreams and like hearing, like speaking to them like in dreams, and having conversations with them in dreams and hearing messages from them in dreams. And then also just kind of, I don't know, how do you explain that, kind of like in life, and just in a similar way to how you would like just be doing something in your life, but being present in that moment, and you feel like, oh, universe is telling me something. It's similar to that feeling of like, oh, someone's trying to say something to me, and let me listen to this, and let me be present in this moment, and let me hear, and to just and hear it as like the voice of a child, and hear it as I don't know if that makes sense, or
Yeah, it totally makes
how
sense
it
to
is for
me.
me.
It's so
Yeah,
hard, right? Like, because yeah, you're hearing it like within your own mind. It's not like I mean, I can sometimes within my head hear a voice, but it's not like an audible voice that someone sitting next to me would also hear. So, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I
Yes.
think and being like just connected, like being when you are present, like being in nature, and just like yeah, kind of like I don't know. Yeah, just um yeah, and I have also like been, say for example, doing yoga or doing like just breathing, or lying in bed at night and like holding my womb and like speaking to my womb, and like kind of like feeling my womb, and and my womb has kind of like in those moments functioned as kind of like a portal for these these messages and these voices and this information. um
Thank you so
and
much. And so
yeah,
you were saying in this pregnancy, you were speaking to this little one, the spirit that you knew was a girl and that you knew this was not the timing for her to come through. So yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah. So that was a really like intense time. It was really like emotionally challenging, difficult. I cried a lot. And yeah, eventually like the kind of like the message that like I got from her was like, okay, like I understand you need to end this pregnancy, like and but like I choose you as my mom and like you need to get your shit together. Like because like it's like it's been ages since I've been wanting to come through and I want to come through. I'm not going to not come through and like you need to like sort your life out, like find like the right man and you know get your shit together essentially. And like I'm not going to wait. She was like, I'm not going to wait that long. So it was a real like kick in the butt. Like I wasn't at that point, I wasn't like I wasn't like searching for like a stable partner or I was kind of there was a lot of things going on and there was a lot of political instability in Haiti at the time. But the message was really clear from her. It was like, yeah, get your shit together. Like I'm gonna come through soon. And so I ended up having a pregnancy release at home just for like information's sake. Like Zytotech, you can buy Zytotech over the counter in Haiti, like you can in Mexico and many other places around the world. So it was really easy to get my hands on some misoprostol. And I did take herbs. I did take some like neem and some blue and black cohosh and some other things. But um, I I waited on the advice of a midwife friend at the time. I waited till I was 9 weeks before I took the pills, and I set myself up really well at home. I was alone completely. My kids were with their dad at the time, and I had a hot water bottle for my womb, and I had yeah, everything that I needed. I was close to the bathroom, and yeah, ended up having like a really like intense like and spiritual experience, like releasing this pregnancy. And I kept the tissue, and I could see like the amniotic sac and the little placenta, and I held like a ritual like in my garden and um buried that little baby and sang songs, and it was really beautiful. And then I had two girlfriends at the time that came that I had told about it and that had supported me, and they came after and like brought me soup and massage and just like took care of me, and we went for walks in nature and just kind of cried and chatted with them, and that was really beautiful. It was really simple, but it was beautiful, and it was everything that I needed at the time. Um, and it was a real like kick in the butt. It was a real kick in the butt of like, you know, don't be like messing around with men that you're not serious about, and also like make steps in your life to like to find somebody that, if you want more kids. And I knew that I did. Um, yeah, like I said, get my shit together.
Yeah, she wanted you to find her dad, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And I had to move to another country to do that. So
okay.
then eventually 6 months later, we moved to Costa Rica, my kids and we bought a little block of land here, and we moved in here. And then, um, well, like a year after that, or a year and a little bit after that, I met my current partner, Sebastian. And straight away, like on the very first day, I was like, "Do you want children?" And he was like, "Yes, yes." And he's always wanted kids, and that was really important to me because I already knew, like, I wanted to have more kids. And um yeah, we definitely spoke about that. And I fell madly in love with him, and he fell in love with me, and we started living together. And then very soon I was pregnant. And yeah, it was really really exciting. I was actually attending a birth when I realized that I was pregnant. I was at a birth here, and it was a really long birth. It was like 35 hours. And I was like, why am I so tired? I was like, I am very tired. Yes, it's a long birth, but like I am very tired. And then I was like, I wonder if I'm pregnant. And sure enough, um, realized that I was. I had a really beautiful and incredible pregnancy. I would say this pregnancy was, of all my pregnancies, the pregnancy that I was most able to really enjoy. And that partly is because I was just in a really positive and good space in my life with a really beautiful partner, and just like emotionally, like, you know, much more stable. I definitely had a lot of morning sickness during this pregnancy. Heaps, like a lot of morning sickness. There were days when I was just vomiting every half an hour on the couch. And I also had like quite a bad kidney infection during the first trimester, which was not fun. Started with a UTI and then, did all the things. I was drinking marigold tea and the cranberry juice and the this and the that, but it ended up being a kidney infection. So that was pretty horrible. And I had to go to the clinic for that. Um, but apart from that, once I hit 12 weeks, that's the magic number. I've started feeling really great. And yeah, I had a really beautiful pregnancy. Just at the beach and walking in nature. And one of the really beautiful things, and other women listening to this would appreciate, like if they have older kids when they're pregnant, was like being able to share the experience of being pregnant with my older children that were now 9 and 7. And so like all of the questions, right, like about like, oh, how does the baby grow and how do you get the sperm and the this and then that, and then okay, and then how does the baby grow ears, and what happens and how do you feel, and feeling the baby and palpating and talking about how the baby's going to be born and when will the baby talk and what language will the baby speak when it comes out, and just all the questions from the older kids. I just really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that sounds so fun and sweet. And yes, and now with Sebastian, right? It's like his first birth that he's gonna be at other than his own. Is that true?
Of
Yeah.
course, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's never had a partner that was pregnant before, and so that whole experience of being pregnant, and of course, he was on board for wild pregnancy and free birth from the get-go. I think it's a lot easier, like from his perspective, knowing that this is my work and that this is what I do. And so he's from the very beginning has like never doubted me and has always like been 100% supportive of all of that. Um, and yeah, and I felt um it was so beautiful to be holding village prenatals throughout my pregnancy for myself and for all of the pregnant women in the community. That was amazing. And yeah, I really felt like just how beautiful they can be. And I felt that what I lacked in my second pregnancy of like feeling like, oh, I'm having a wild pregnancy, but I feel lonely and I feel like I didn't have that sisterhood to help me celebrate. I had that in this pregnancy. And I have such an incredible like community of women here where we are in Talamanca. And I had a beautiful mother blessing during my pregnancy that was held by my gorgeous friend Aguita that she organized, and there was like 45 women that came, and it was the most beautiful ceremony. And I just felt like so much love from all the women in the community, and to be supporting women through that like rite of passage and that transition, and then to have that reflected back, um, and to have women support me, it was just like it was just so beautiful. Yeah.
What like a reparative and beautiful pregnancy to have.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I had no photos from my first two births,
Uh-huh.
and so that was one of the things that I thought, oh, I really want like a photographer at this birth. And so I just happened to have a really good friend of mine that is a photographer, but had never attended a birth before. And I just said to her, like, would you come to my birth? And she was like, what? Like, yeah, sure, why not? And then, I went through the whole thing with her of like what a birth looks like, and, is she okay with, vulvas and blood and poo and all of the things? And she's like, yeah, she's a real like down to earth, cool, no drama, no fuss type of person. And she was excited, really excited. And so I invited her to my birth. and that was it. That was like the only thing. I felt like in my other two births, I felt like if I invited a photographer, I would just feel observed. And, I didn't have any friends that were photographers at the time. But in this pregnancy, because I already knew her name's Sierra, because I already knew her, and I felt comfortable with her, like I felt comfortable being naked in front of her and hanging out with her. It felt perfect, and I felt like I wasn't going to feel observed. And I also said to her, like, if I feel observed, I will kick you out. And she was like, yes, please, no worries. Um, so yeah, that was a really beautiful thing to have. And so that was the only person that I was going to have to call
Yes.
when I went
Your
into
kids
labor.
want to be there? Were
What's
your
that?
were your two older children wanting to be present when this?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
awesome.
We were talking about it throughout the whole pregnancy. They were super
Yeah.
excited. They were like, "Oh my God, I can't wait!" And we watched so many videos and um, yeah, my like just so many videos. They're super interested in like breech births and all these different types of births and asking a million questions and Ollie was there for my daughter's birth. And I said jokingly to my partner Sebastian, I was like, oh, if you have a question, just kind of default to, to Ollie. He'll probably know the answer. Like he's such a good little doula. Um, and yeah, they were great. They were like super ready and like they asked any questions that they had. And yeah, they made me promise that I would wake them up. And my mum planned to come from Australia for the birth. That was the other thing. Um, she wanted to be here to help me out postpartum, and she just like kind of picked a random date. I mean, I just said, oh well, this is kind of when I might be due. Who knows? And then she just picked a random date, which there's a plane passing by. Yeah, she picked the 19th of June to book her flights to arrive in Costa Rica. Um, And one other funny thing during that pregnancy was that I told Sierra, my birth photographer, like my like actual like calculated date at the beginning of my pregnancy. And I said it was probably about the 20th of June, I would say, but like allow to be on call, say from the 15th of June to the 15th of July or up until the end of July, you know, or the whole due date thing. I was ready to be pregnant for 45 weeks if it went that way. And then after I told her that date, I just made up dates for everybody else that asked. Everybody else in the community, because everybody, every man and his dog wants to ask you when you're due, like at the supermarket and at the bank and everywhere, right? So I just said end of July. I said end of July to everybody that asked, to the point where I actually forgot when I was actually due. Like I kind of like tricked everybody else and also tricked myself, because then my daughter was born on the 19th of June. She came on the 19th of June, and I had originally sort of like semi-calculated the 20th of June. And then when I went back and looked at my dates, I was almost 42 weeks. So I was like 41 and 5 or something like that. No, wait. Yeah, 41 and 5.
Yeah.
Um,
It's something and you knew that time was like her time. That's amazing.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
knew at the beginning. I connected into it and was like, yep, that's when she's soon ready. But then I just lied to everybody else, and then I kind of just forgot about like when she might be coming. I just kind of lived my life and was pregnant. Um, so so with her, I actually did get like a couple of days of early labor,
Okay.
which was different
Yeah.
for me. And so I had she was born on the Thursday evening, and on the Tuesday evening, so that would have been the 17th. I just had like a few little tightenings and nigglings, and I was like, oh, I'm getting excited, and getting like candles ready and because my daughter was born in an hour. I thought, well, as soon as I started to feel a contraction, I probably should just get my shit ready, like get the candles and um, and sort of every time Sebastian would go out, he's a musician, so he plays, gigs for like, 2 or 3 hours. He might come back to a baby, like, might come quite quickly. Um, so we were sort of joking towards the end of the pregnancy with that. Um, but nothing happened on the Tuesday. And then on the Wednesday, I had a few little contractions here and there, just like very light tightenings. And on the Wednesday evening, I was starting to get really excited, and preparing the space and just kind of like coming into that, just sort of floating into labor land and getting things ready. I made a huge pot of like rice pudding, like coconut rice pudding that I love to eat, like as my first postpartum meal. It's like packed with like cinnamon and cloves and nutmeg and coconut milk, and it's just delicious when you eat it warm. Kind of like a congee, but like Haitian style, Caribbean style. And yeah. And then on the Thursday morning, I had a few little like contractions. Um, nothing, you know, nothing. I was having like maybe one little light contraction every hour or like once every 2 hours or something like that. It's nothing really. I was gardening. I went and harvested some bananas and, just did some things around the house. We were dancing. And then at 1 o'clock, Sebastian and my two older kids drove to the airport to pick up my mum. And because she was arriving from Australia, and Sebastian sort of looked at me and said, "Is it okay for me to go? Like, should we just, call a taxi for her to come? What if you have the baby while I'm gone?" And I was like, "No, no, just go, just go, just go. It'll be fine. The baby's not coming just yet. There's like these contractions are so far apart." So they go, they pick her up, they come back. They were back at about 2:30. And then, of course, my kids are excited. Grandma's arrived from Australia. She's got all the Vegemite and all, all the things that they've asked her to bring. Her suitcase just kind of like explodes all over the house, and so it's all very exciting energy. And I'm kind of in my head thinking, is this baby coming tonight? Or like the contractions were so mild, so light, and like I said, one every hour or something like that. And so I see, the kind of contractions that you're like, it could be tonight or it could be 3 weeks from now. Um, and so I'm just kind of doing my thing. I'm listening to kind of like chill, like meditation music, and then I'm like, this isn't working. And then so then I put on like like R&B, like old school R&B and like old school like reggae, and just like blasted it. And we were like dancing and having fun. It was like this big party in the house. And then finally at 8 o'clock at night, I felt like an effective like contraction, like a contraction that was more intense. And I felt I'm like yes, like a really good contraction. Then it was I just knew like she was coming tonight. It was like I had this one intense contraction at 8 o'clock, and I just knew. And prior to that, like maybe at 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, late afternoon, Sebastian had said to me, "Should we call Sierra, the birth photographer?" And I was like, "No, no, no. It could be days, could be, And then at 8 o'clock, when I had that very good, like efficient, beautiful contraction, I said to him, "Call Sierra, fill up the pool." And that was it. And I didn't speak any other words from that point on until she was born, basically. And she was born 2 hours and 20 minutes after that. So I had that first contraction, and then they started like every 5 minutes, every 2 minutes. I mean, we weren't timing them, but just feeling them coming more regularly. And then everybody's getting really excited. The kids got excited. They all helped to fill up the pool and blow it up. Um, and I just put a yoga mat like right next to the pool. And I think I was on the yoga mat maybe for an hour, in all fours. And my kids were giving me massage and counter pressure, and Sebastian as well. And yeah, it was really beautiful. The contractions were like strong, but really good. Um, Not super painful. They felt really effective. Um, they, yeah, she felt like she was in a really good position, and she felt like she was descending. And then Um, I think my mom or Sebastian had someone had said like, oh, do you want to get in the pool or something? And I think I had said like, oh, I'll know when, and then I just did. At some point, I just stood up, got in the pool, and it was the perfect temperature. And then I must have been in the pool. I don't know, maybe it was an hour, maybe it was less than an hour. And yeah, it was so beautiful. You can see in the birth video, like of my kids pouring water over my back. Oh my God, that was just the best feeling of like warm water just running like from the back of my head all the way down my back. It was just, oh, it was so nice. And we don't have hot water in our house. Like we just shower in cold water. We live in the tropics anyways. It's not like it's cold. Um, but warm water is like super luxurious, like where, in our house and where we live. And I do really love baths. Like, we don't have a bath, but it just felt like, super luxurious and like, oh, I get to like this is such a treat. It's such a treat to be like in warm water and just be like attended to with so much love. And yeah, it just felt amazing. It felt just yeah, felt so beautiful. Um and the water really felt like it offered a lot of relief. Just from and I was able to just kind of like flow and dance and yeah, just really relax. Like it just felt really relaxing and beautiful. And I think I had maybe like two or three like intense contractions where I really like held on to Sebastian's forearms. And they were really, really intense. And then I just felt her come through and I had both of my older kids had come through, like Ollie came through with just like one contraction, came through my whole birth canal and came out. And then Kaya came out, like popped head and then popped body. And so with neither of them had I ever felt that like ring of fire that women talk about. Like if your vulva like really stretching, your vulva and your perineum like just really stretching and like holding in that position, you know? I don't know, did you feel that with your kids?
Yeah, so I definitely like my son, he felt like he came out quite fast. My daughter, she was right there at my perineum and I held her in for several sensations. Like my body was pushing her and like if I wouldn't have been holding her in, she would have been birthed, but I was not ready and so I held her head until I was ready and then when I released her head came out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And would you describe that sensation as like ring of fire, or it was kind of before that she was higher up than that?
Yeah, I mean it was I think what women describe as the ring of fire, that like burning sensation. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So I felt that like with her just for a second because she came out, she like her head took two contractions to pop out. So I felt one contraction where like the I've had really intense like FER for all of my births, like the fetal injection reflex just like wild, like this train just coming through you. Such an incredible feeling. Like I love the feeling. It's just amazing. It's just like all this energy just like imploding. And so I felt that. I pushed and I roared and her head like half came out. And so my vulva and my perineum were like stretched over her head like for a sec, like for I don't know, who the hell knows how long it was. Maybe it was 4 seconds or 5 seconds, or maybe it was 30 seconds. And I remember thinking like, wow, like, this is like such a big stretch, like this is the ring of fire. And then she popped out in the next contraction. And then I just kind of held there for a minute and just breathed and felt that like deep sense of like sort of like I don't know how you would just it's like relief, but it's kind of um just like intense like joy and like pride of like, oh, I've done this. And when once their head is out, And you can just kind of like breathe and like just kind of really like kind of fall down and come into your body and being like, I've done this. And like now you pause and you breathe and you prepare yourself to receive your baby. And so I did that and then I just breathed. And then in the next contraction, she popped up, she popped out. I was in the water in the pool, so I just pulled her out um, onto my chest and then well, her little slippery body, and we all checked to see what she was. Well, I checked to see what she was and said that she was a girl, and everyone was just, joyful and happy. And I think Sebastian was in tears, and we all hugged each other, and it was just, yeah, gorgeous and beautiful. And oh, and I didn't mention that, Sierra had arrived, and so she was, taking photos and videos the whole time, but I barely noticed her there. She was there for 2 hours. Well, yeah, it ended up being there for longer because she stayed for the birth of the placenta. But yeah, it was amazing and so beautiful and so simple. And I remember having my eyes closed as I pulled her up out of the water and having her on my chest. And I remember opening my eyes and kind of like locking eyes with everybody in the room, like locking eyes with Sebastian and my kids and my mom, just because I felt like, from 8 o'clock when I went into like full Labourland mode, I hadn't kind of connected with them or spoken to them. So it was just kind of this, it's like this moment. You see a lot of women do this in birth, like where they kind of come back and connect and just kind of with that look be like, yeah, I'm here and like, thank you for supporting me through this and we did it and here we are. And you sort of come back into your body as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, yeah, that connection, like you're saying, back with your own body and then with the other people that are present there witnessing you. And I know,
Absolutely.
I know that.
Yeah.
Mm,
It was
wow.
beautiful, yeah. And then I think I stayed in the pool for about an hour after she was born. Oh, and I also remember like looking at Sierra, and asking her what time it was when she was born and expecting her to say something like midnight or 1 a.m. or because time is like this strange thing. It doesn't exist in birth. And when she said 10:20, I thought, wow, like I thought that it was longer than that. It was only 2 hours and 20 minutes.
And
Um,
10:20 is your own birth time, right? Yeah.
yeah, and then my mom was right there, and she was like, "Oh, it's the same time you were born. How funny!"
Oh,
And then I stayed in the birth in the pool for about an hour, just resting and relaxing. There was no blood, no meconium. The water was like very clear. We were just relaxing, and then eventually went to the bed. And my placenta took the longest of all of my placentas. It took 2 hours for me to birth the placenta. Oh, and the after pains were really intense this time too. But at least I was ready for them psychologically. I was like, okay, mantra again. My body is wise. My body is wise. My uterus is wise. But yeah, really intense after pains again. Um, and I was on the bed and I did have to like work a little bit higher to birth the placenta. It was midnight. It was 12:30 when I birthed the placenta, so it was just a little over 2 hours. And yeah, I squatted on the bed with a bowl underneath. Yeah, and I did have to like push it a little bit to get the placenta out, but I was just ready. I was like, yeah, I really want to birth this placenta. And my kids were still awake, and they needed to go to sleep. I would have liked to have waited longer to cut her cord. Like I waited 4 or 5 hours with my daughter's birth. I would have liked to have waited probably, a few more hours more, but my kids wanted to go to bed and I really wanted my daughter to cut her cord because my son had cut her cord and he said, oh, well, it makes sense that then you cut the baby's cord. So my daughter was really excited to be able to cut her cord. And so after I birthed the placenta, not long after that, I briefly inspected the placenta, and then at that point the after pains are so intense. I was like, oh, maybe I'll like play with the placenta or like make art with the placenta. I'm like, no, like put it in the freezer. Um, and yeah, we cut the cord, Kaya cut. Um, Her cord, my youngest, my daughter that I birthed 2 months ago, her name is Melody. So Kaya cut Melody's cord, and then the my older kids went to bed, and yeah, we just like wrapped her up and snuggled her and went to sleep. I ate some food and had some nice tea, and that was it.
Did she also wait some time before she nursed or did no?
No, she latched straight away.
Okay.
Yeah, she latched straight away. Yeah, she's been like a pro at breastfeeding from the get-go. Um, yeah, she was even trying to latch like when I was in the pool.
Uh-huh.
Like straight after she was born.
Yeah.
Same with my son. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, but she was, most like so many newborn babies, they're really sleepy when they first come out. So in the first couple of days, they sleep a lot.
Yeah.
And I was, again, super high, just, staring at my baby.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was beautiful. It was amazing. Like I felt really held and supported throughout the whole experience by my partner and by, my kids and my mom and my community. And, this time I waited until day 5 to start steaming.
Uh-huh.
um, Only because my after pains were so intense that the first 3 days of after pains, I didn't feel like getting up and sitting on my little, I call it my pussy box. My kids, my kids call it like my pussy box as well. But I just didn't feel like doing that. So I waited till day 5 and then I started steaming from day 5. I had heaps of food in the freezer that I had prepared. So we were super stocked up, um, and just drank really delicious teas. And I really stayed in bed. I did the full 42 days postpartum this time, which was amazing. I didn't really go into like super detail with my other postpartums, but I left the house too early on, numerous occasions. And
Mhm.
this time I did the full 42 days. I was in bed for like 2 weeks. And then once I hit 2 weeks, I started to sort of get up a little bit more and like maybe go out to the garden a bit and like make tea and do other things. And then from one other incredible thing, which I highly recommend doing, is once I hit 2 weeks, like we had a WhatsApp group for my mother blessing, and so there were 45 women in that group. And so once I felt ready to have visitors, I just put a little post in that group. And then from from when I hit 2 weeks postpartum, for the next 4 weeks after that, right until I got up to 42 days, I had a woman come to my house almost every single day that was going around the community and picking up food from women. So they would come not just with one meal, but with multiple meals and snacks and gifts and things from other women. And they would come to my house and usually deliver it, and we'd just have like a little tea and have a chat on the bed and have a bit of a snuggle. And then they would, drop all of these delicious foods off. It was incredible. My kids were like, "This is like Christmas. Like, what is going on?" Just every day, this beautiful woman would turn up with all of these gifts and
Wow.
food. So that was amazing. So I felt like really just like super held by the community. So I really highly recommend like women doing that if you can. It's such a beautiful, beautiful
Yes.
thing to have women come and change your flowers in your vase and bring you a tea. Like it's just beautiful care that we have always done for each other, and it feels beautiful.
How wonderful and what a blessing to have that community that you've obviously, cultivated and built through this time. And I love that they came and showed up for you and brought you food and their loving presence. And wow. Rose,
Yeah, it was amazing, and it's filled me, inspired me even more so to to show up like that for other women in the community.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, Rose, is there anything else you want to share about Melody's birth or postpartum?
Um, I don't think so. Maybe just that like one really fun thing to do for me was also to not to do one really. like fun part of the whole experience was to witness Sebastian transform into a father as
Mhm.
well. Like having already been a mother myself, watching him, watching him transition into becoming a father has been really beautiful and really incredible. And um, like all the little things, like when you have like so many kids, you know, there's so many. Sometimes you just don't notice the little things anymore, or you're so used to, you know, babies that do that or things that happen. You don't necessarily notice them, but it's all new to him, you know? And so like that's been a really beautiful like experience to to witness him um and such a beautiful way for him to become a father, you know, to have experienced like a wild pregnancy and a free birth at home, a family birth, and such a beautiful postpartum. Like he's just like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
And, you know, in my head, I'm like, I wish that, you know, I wish that all men had an experience like that, you know, when they first become a father. Mm.
absolutely. I mean, I still can't believe that, yeah, here in the US, it's just 1 to 2% of babies and women that are birthing outside of the hospital right now. It's like, I think a lot of times women, because those are the videos and things that we're seeing online, are home birth, you know, whether it's with a midwife or not, like those are the videos that show up online. So people think that it's so much more common than it is. And yet it's just like a
Mhm.
fraction of, like you're saying, the women birthing themselves and the babies and the husbands and the family that get to experience this type of birth that I
Mm.
feel is so needed and could be so healing to the world to,
Absolutely. And when you take that 2%, then you realize that 98% of the population is coming into motherhood and into fatherhood in trauma and
yeah,
obstetric violence and rape. And I mean, it's just, yeah. Then which is so it's why it's so important for, you know, women that having positive birth experiences. If you're listening to this and you've had a really beautiful positive birth, like please like talk about it, share about it because um you know, so many women, so many podcasts that I've listened to, the 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 kind of thing that has pushed a woman to choose to birth at home has been another story from another woman. And
mhm,
so hearing these stories, knowing that it's an option, that you can choose this for yourself and for your family from your first birth. You don't have to wait, you know, for your second birth or your third birth to choose
yeah,
this for yourself and for your family. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of time. You know, it's like industrialized birth. It's a business, and once customers under capitalism, that's just how businesses function. Once the customers leave the shop, the business has to shut down or it has to shift its way if it wants customers back. And so women just need to start walking away, just walk away like in mass, just choose something else. That's not your only option. Um,
right. Just a few generations ago, most births happened at home and in the community, and we're not in these facilities and under the power of these medical.
Absolutely, yeah. And to think that, you know, it's only been 100 years, and we've managed to lose so much of this knowledge, and to get to the point where 98% of women are choosing to birth in the system. Like, yes, that's like really sad, but at the same time, it means like, you know, it's not gonna take long for us to flip the narrative back.
Right, that we could quickly be the opposite, where just a few percent of people are in the hospital. There's that potential.
Absolutely.
Do you want to tell the women where they can find you? And I'll put links in the show
Absolutely.
notes and things. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, my Instagram handle is Wild Birthkeeper, and you can get in touch with me there. I attend births here in the South Caribbean of Costa Rica and Talamanca. There are many other birth workers here, beautiful birth keepers and doulas and traditional midwives here in the area. We have a really good, like solid community of birth keepers here, and we all support each other. We have monthly gatherings where we get together. I also host village prenatals here in Puerto Viejo. If anybody is around, even if you're just like, even if you don't live here in Puerto Viejo, but you're traveling through and you happen to be pregnant, or like maybe you're in your preconception trying to conceive, or even in your postpartum, if you want to come along, please get in touch and you can find out when the next one is. And I also do online and in-person birth trauma medicines, like stories where we, process birth trauma. I do that online and in person. And I also support women going through pregnancy release, whether that's, spontaneous pregnancy release or a chosen pregnancy release.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rose. I just loved hearing your stories here today and connecting with you more. And I know that your wisdom and all you had to share here is really gonna impact some other women. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to me and hearing me and managing all the little interruptions with all the kids.
No worries. It's real. It's raw. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Heart of the Soul podcast. If you love this podcast, I would be so grateful if you might leave a rating or review or share the show with someone that you know. And if you want to work with me, please check out my website and my current offerings there. And if you have any questions, just send me a DM or an email. Sending you all so much love. Mwah.